Alright, my name is Josh Tolleson, and this is my informative speech. This is my audience.
Colorado.
Alright, Debo, would you do the honors?
Yeah, I would love to.
Thank you. How many people here have seen the show Star Trek at any time?
Here, I have.
I've seen Star Trek.
Here.
Pretty much everybody has seen an episode. Can you guys tell me what season it was?
70.
Live strong and
That's
prosper.
impossible.
Was it a newer episode or was it one of the old ones?
What episode are we? What were you referring
Older.
to?
Deep Space Nine. It was all.
Deep Space Nine?
Star Trek.
Good one?
I've seen the one with Shatner.
That's the very first one. That's a really good one too. It's the one that whenever I got out of the military, me and Jamie, my wife, got really into Star Trek. And we started watching it back-to-back episodes like everybody watches TV shows now, except that's a lot more sizable of a show, so it took a while. We fell in love with it because it was great because I tried to get her into Star Wars, didn't work. She hated it. We started watching Star Trek, and what she liked first about it was the fact that the women in the show were beautiful and they had really good makeup. And that's, sometimes you have to appeal to women in certain ways. And that's how I got her into that show. And I like the show obviously for a lot of other reasons, but whatever gets her to sit on the couch with me and watch it.
The rocks off.
Yeah, it was great.
I hear you.
Star Trek was a show that started in 1966. It aired for 3 seasons originally, starring William Shatner, like everybody knows, the famous. Yeah, he's a great actor.
Shat.
Quote unquote.
Excuse me. The show went on for 3 seasons and was canceled due to a poor initial reaction from the audience, which is surprising. After a couple of years rolled by, the kind of cult following thing started happening, and it turned into the whole conventions thing that we see now, that we know of nowadays. So what happened was, actually all the actors, William Shatner and everything, all the other guys, Leonard Nimoy, they started to go broke and everything because they weren't getting enough funding because their show was canceled. After the convention started picking up and interest started prevailing for the show, they started to get more notoriety, and then more scripts for new shows started coming out. But actually, unfortunately, a new show would not come out until 1987. If you're not, because we're not counting the animated series, which doesn't, I don't consider that.
Oh, of course.
Continuation. It's a cartoon.
Obviously.
It's crap. I agree.
It was way too long. But the Next Generation was my favorite iteration because it came out the year I was born, and it had a great cast of characters, and it was way more diverse than the actual original series, I felt. So everybody knows that fans of Star Trek are called Trekkies. The franchise spins a huge rate of spin-offs of movies, video games, everything, all the memorabilia. They made a lot of money with this show. They actually have a actual constructed language based off the TV show. It's called Klingon. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. That is not a joke. That is actually a language. You can actually read up on it and speak it after a good bit of time. One moment. One famous thing that you guys may not know about, since you guys have all seen at least one episode of Star Trek, is that it featured the first ever aired interracial kiss between a white male and a black woman. Well, any race combination. And here's a picture of it, if you guys would like to see. Well, you look at it, right here. See?
Should he be taking?
Oh yeah, straight up.
That is hot.
Who could help himself?
Star Trek was unique of its kind because it did something that cinema never did before, like this. That was unprecedented for its time. It really broke boundaries in terms of things like this, and also addressed current issues that were going on, like back in the 60s. It was coming out for the civil rights stuff, so they had a couple of episodes that focused on racial equality or anything of that nature. And this is a clip or an image from one of the episodes that talks about racism. As you can see, these are 2 individuals, black on one side of their face, white on one side of their face, but they are opposite from each other. So this is these two people don't like each other because they feel like they are drastically different, when really they are very similar. Kind of like how the issue was handled in America. Star Trek, after the Next Generation it went for 7 seasons, and then after that, 2 shows came out simultaneously, Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Voyager was about a female captain, which was unique also. They had a female as a lead character in a role, who got lost out in deep space. Deep Space Nine was a black captain, which is the first one also, to go be out in charge of a space station instead of an actual starship. After that, there really hadn't been much happening with it, except there was a show called Starship Enterprise, which didn't last too long. It was actually a prequel that goes before the original Star Trek, which is before they actually reached interstellar travel, which kind of sucks because you don't have the whole beaming and everything, so it's like Star Trek, but it's not Star Trek. Lots of movies came out. Lots of movies. There's the best one is obviously Wrath of Khan. If you guys have ever watched it, it's a very good movie. One of the best. I'd say arguably up there with Star Wars movies. Excuse me. So they had a lot. In the original series, they had a very simple cast. It was three main big characters. You had Kirk, who was the captain of the starship, and then you had Lieutenant Commander Spock. And then you had Dr. McCoy. Dr. McCoy symbolized the human emotion quality. Lieutenant Commander Spock represents the logic, pure logic with no devoid of any kind of emotion. And then Captain Kirk represents a combination of the two. So that's how every episode was kind of McCoy and Spock would butt heads, and then Kirk would have to come in and rationalize. Let's see, making sure I'm not forgetting anything. Very recently, there have been 2 reboot movies that have been done from J.J. Abrams that have been, I feel, very successful. Especially the second one. It was also it was technically a adaptation of The Wrath of Khan, which I thought was really good. It was a very good movie. It did well in the box offices. Now, one thing I want to close up with is a lot of people compare Star Trek and Star Wars, like they're 2 very similar shows, like which one, someone has to stand by one or the other, they're so polarized, but I personally feel like they're so different that they don't need to be compared. They can't be compared. Star Wars is technically a space opera. It's a show about a boy who grew up with nothing, who became the universe-changing element that the world needed. Star Trek is a space western, which is just a military group that's going out there and trying to bring peace to the galaxy. There's a drastic difference between the 2. I don't feel one's a TV show, one's a set of movies. They both have very different linear storylines. I don't see why there's so much animosity between the fan base. What I will say is that whichever side you choose, it's a good one because they're both excellent franchises. So, now that I have concluded my period of instruction, does anybody have any questions for me?
Name of the female captain. Janeway?
I haven't watched Voyager yet. I'm halfway through Deep Space Nine.
I asked you and I remembered. I apologize.
Janeway?
Captain Janeway.
That sounds good. Anybody else?
Black captain?
Captain Sisko.
Cisco. I did not.
I think, Josh, that you did a great job.
Thank you. Yes, Weber.
Do they ever have any mashups between Deep Space Nine and Voyager into like one sort of weird episode?
That's a good question. In an episode I actually watched the other day of Deep Space Nine, it kind of ties into, like, the captain from The Next Generation, Captain Picard, he visits the ship that the Captain Sisko is taking over. And there's like a transition period to where you see like how he interacts with him, and then that relationship. He doesn't show up that much anymore, but they do blend it a little bit. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think it's kind of cool when they do that.
Anybody else have any questions for me at this point in time? Thank you.